The Miami Dolphins were busy on Tuesday when they had to trim their roster from 90 to 53 players. Well, the moves will not stop coming in for this football team. Chris Grier made 4 more roster moves on Wednesday morning, with more to come. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff. The first one that was announced by Chris Grier himself during his press conference this morning in Miami, that Kendall Lamm is returning to the Dolphins to help with their offensive line depth. He was cut by the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday. Remember, he was with the Dolphins last year, signed a 1-year deal in free agency with the Eagles, then ultimately doesn't make their roster and comes back to the 305. And to me, this is just such a smart move for the Miami Dolphins. Offensive line, and specifically offensive tackle depth on this roster, was maybe the most concerning aspect of the entire thing. We talk a lot about the cornerback room, but the way the second and third offensive line units looked during the preseason, I would say that quickly became one of my biggest concerns, as well as a lot of fans and other Dolphins media members. But Lamm is as sure-handed as it gets and was very solid for Miami just 1 year ago. And this is why you got to follow me on Twitter, by the way. Not only did I tell you the news about Kendall Lamm signing with the Dolphins before we came out and made this video, but how about when it was announced that Lamm got cut by the the Eagles yesterday, I tweeted, see it, Kendall Lamb's been cut by the Eagles. Bring him back, ... Hey, and he did come back. So that is why you follow me on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff. But this is where the depth chart stands right now. I moved Keon Smith down on the depth chart, who was the primary backup right tackle. But we do know that if any of Paul or Jackson missed time, Larry Borom would be the first up. I now anticipate that to be Kendall Lamm. Lamm filled in at right tackle last season once Austin Jackson got hurt, and God forbid he gets hurt or misses time again. I think Lamm would be the first player to be called up to the starting unit rather than Larry Borom. And the reason why I think that is, well, Keon Smith and Larry Borom were horrific. Keon Smith had one of the worst games I have ever seen graded by PFF in that first one against the Chicago Bears. He did bounce back against Jacksonville and Detroit to close out the preseason, but both him and Larry Borom gave a lot more concerning things to me than a lot more positive things. Lamm, a player that did a ton of positive things for Miami last season, was a no-brainer to re-sign. He appeared in 512 snaps because he did have to start for pretty much the second half of the season because of Austin Jackson's injury. And he graded out very nicely. 83.1 pass blocker, no sacks allowed, only 1 penalty. Like, Lamm was very serviceable. He was very solid. And when he got hurt in the back end of the year and we had to see, like, Jackson Carman play right tackle, well, that's when it really got off the rails for the Dolphins. But in the middle to late half of the season when Lamm is in right tackle, the offensive line wasn't as bad as it was at the beginning or end of the year. And I'm excited that Kendall Lamm is back with Miami. If you are with me, type those initials KL down in the comments. Welcome, Kendall, back to the 305. I know that he is happy to be back and having a role on a football team, so show him the love. Now, the Dolphins did have to make a corresponding move because we are now in the point of the season where you can't go more than 53 players on a roster. So if you sign someone, you got to get rid of someone. And the player that Miami ultimately got rid of, not in terms of a release, but off of the 53-man, was cornerback Cam Smith. I was not that surprised that he was carried through the 53-man roster cutdown day because he did play relatively fine in the final 2 weeks of the season, or preseason, I should say, after getting healthy. But he was not spotted at practice on Tuesday afternoon, which was odd that he wasn't at practice but then was kept. Well, he was placed on the non-football injury list, which explains why he wasn't at practice yesterday. So hopefully everything is fine with Cam Smith because it says non-football injury list. So he's not injured, just is away from the team. So I hope Cam Smith is doing all right. Other roster moves that we saw. Miami officially made the Rasul Douglas signing, which means they had to get rid of a player. I said yesterday that I anticipated either Ethan Bonner being placed on IR or Cam Smith being released to make room for Rasul Douglas. We did see Cam Smith get moved off of the 53-man roster, so I'll give myself half credit there. But the player that was actually waived was Jordan Colbert, and I feel terrible for Jordan Colbert because he made the 53-man roster. It was a little bit of a surprise. He was at Dolphins practice yesterday and then just gets ultimately released. I am curious to see if Miami told Colbert, hey, you're going to be carried through the 53-man, but then cut tomorrow to make room for Douglas. And we're doing that, though, to make sure you don't go on waivers so we can ultimately bring you back to the practice squad. That is certainly a possibility here, so I would keep an eye on Colbert returning to the P squad for Miami. But now that this signing is official, the Dolphins have 6 corners on the team's roster. Storm Duck, Jack Jones, and Jason Marshall Jr. still project to be the starters against the Colts in Week 1. And then your depth pieces right now are Rasul Douglas, Ethan Bonner, and Isaiah Johnson. Obviously, Cam Smith is on the NFI, so he does not count on the 53-man roster. So 6 CBs currently on this grouping. I expect Douglas to potentially be elevated to a starting role if Jack Jones or Storm Duck inevitably struggle at some point early on in the season. But in an ideal world, maybe Storm Duck and Jack Jones just never struggle and Rasul Douglas never sees the field. Well, he'll obviously see the field, but obviously you want those 2 young guys to find their own path and become a starter for this football team and be a capable, good starter. More to come here in a second, but shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's show, the daily fantasy sports app I play every single day. And with football season officially here, I could not be more happy that PrizePicks is back because I am playing players like Saquon Barkley, Joe Burrow, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, and with college football this weekend, I'm getting on the action. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. They also put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more. Quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. You see my entry on screen for college football week 1, less than on Haynes King, less than on Arch Manning, and more than on Deshaun Bishop. 3-player entry to win 6 times my money. You can take my picks. You can fade my picks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Miami decided to make more roster moves this morning. Now, this one is not official. The practice squad will become more official as the day goes on, so make sure you subscribe and keep an eye on that. But Riley Patterson, the practice squad kicker addition, is going to be added after the Jason Sanders injury. He is on IR, so he will miss the first 4 weeks of the season. But Chris Grier saying it's going to be the practice squad route means one thing and one thing only. He's going to be your kicker for the first 3 weeks. Why do I say that? Well, you are only allowed to elevate a player from the practice squad to the game day roster 3 times a year. So if they do that, as expected, in week 1, week 2, and week 3, Riley Patterson would not be eligible to be activated from the practice squad to the 53-man for the week 4 game, which is the last game Jason Sanders is going to be missing. Which means you either going to have to sign Patterson to the 53-man roster for 1 week, or you're going to have to find a different kicker to add to your practice squad and elevate for that Monday Night Football game against the Jets, and then Sanders will be ready to roll for week 5 against the Carolina Panthers. But let's talk about Riley Patterson just real briefly here. He played in 5 games last season across 3 different teams. 1 for the Jets, 1 for the Browns, and 3 for the Falcons. He did not miss an extra point, 16 of 16, but he did just go 4 of 7 on field goals. And all of those field goals came for the Atlanta Falcons, where he went 4 of 7. He was a perfect 3 of 3 inside 40 yards, but was only 1 of 4 from 40 yards plus. Specifically, 0 for 1 from 40 to 49 yards, and then 1 for 3 from 50-plus yards. So he has a career solid field goal percentage, and he's a solid extra point man, but I would not consider him elite, which is why he is not currently on a roster on the 53-man at least. But we got a lot more roster moves to come before week 1, especially with the Dolphins adding to their practice squad and making some waiver claims later today. So subscribe. We will certainly be back today with another video on all of the moves Miami make. Subscribe, and see you later with another video. Some more news to break down before we get out of here on today's show. Chris Grier just honing in on the fact that Devon Achane will be ready for week 1. Mike McDaniel has said that consistently over the last week, so all signs are good for Achane unless a setback occurs. But this is the part I really wanted to show. They plan to add a couple of running backs to the practice squad for depth, with Jalen Wright set to miss time, whether it be multiple weeks of the regular season or just 1 week. First of all, it's music to my ears because we need more running back depth, and there's some decent running backs out there that Miami could add. We'll look at a couple here in just 1 second. But we know we need more depth to the running back room, and I'm excited to see what Miami ultimately does. I am curious to see if it is going to be a 53-man roster addition or only practice squad additions. Here is the reason why I'm bringing up the waiver wire, though, is because Chris Grier did say that he plans to be a bit aggressive adding players from the waiver wire. So you could see the Dolphins put in 3, 4 claims on players in the NFL waiver wire. Now, obviously, it will be based off the order on if they can get them. And remember, it goes through once, so the Dolphins have to submit their top claim. If that player wasn't claimed by the first 12 teams, well, then they're Miami's. But then all the other players, it's just like as a snake draft almost, and it is very unlikely if you put 4 claims in for 4 players that you will get all 4, but you're hoping to at least get 1 or 2 of your top guys. And when I'm looking at the waiver wire, these are the 10 names that come to my mind right away. Now, some of these guys are veterans that can just be signed right away, like Kendall Lamm, which, hey, number 3 on my board. Cha-ching! Why you follow and subscribe here at the channel, by the way. Like Dan Skipper's a veteran. He doesn't need to be claimed. Jeff Wilson doesn't need to be claimed. Just guys that I would like Miami to sign or claim. These were my top 10. I would love to see Jelani Woods, the tight end, get claimed. I mean, that is my guy on this group. Yeah, I want Damian Martinez, the 7th-round pick from Miami who was cut by Seattle. But Woods, 6'7" tight end that ran a 4.6 40. Fits the scheme perfectly. That's a guy I really hope the Dolphins claim. We'll see. Running backs, obviously, that intrigue me: Jeff Wilson, Damian Martinez, and Audric Estime. Like I said earlier, when the Dolphins make a move, we have you covered on my Twitter before we make a video. So follow me at Nic_Rohloff, and I'll also talk about my opinions on the Miami Dolphins. And then we'll come over here and make a video about it. So follow me on Twitter, subscribe, and I'll see you later with another video. Go Fins.